Hello and welcome to Give and Toke, the show that elevates the conversation about cannabis to a higher level. I'm your host, Paul O'Donoghue, and I'm really excited about this episode where we're joined by two industry trailblazers who have gone from the front lines of patient care to the front lines of cannabis supply. Bashar Al-Humrany, a pharmacist, and Joel Green, a nurse, first crossed paths at Melbourne's Astrid Dispensary, one of the first dedicated medicinal cannabis dispensaries in the country. Together, they saw firsthand where the system was helping and where it was falling short. And now they've teamed up to launch Exotican, an Australian medicinal cannabis importer built from the ground up by people who understand patients, products, and prescriptions. We're talking clinical insight, industry gaps, and of course, the Bash brothers of cannabis. I really enjoyed doing this episode because these guys are good friends, and I'm a big fan of what they've got going on in the industry. If you like what you hear on today's show, be sure to follow us on Instagram at Give and Toke. You can email giveandtoke@gmail.com. You can send in questions. You can ask for things. You can request guests, all sorts of stuff. We do love to hear from you, so please get in touch there. You can also check out giveandtoke.com.au where we have our range of cannabis accessories. Before we kick off with Joel and Bash from Exotican, it's important to remind you as a new addition to the cannabis industry that anything that I discuss on this show does not necessarily reflect the views of my employer. For now, please enjoy my conversation with Joel and Bash from Exotican. So it is my absolute pleasure to have Joel Green and Bashar Al-Humrany here with me from Exotican. Fellas, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us, Paul. We're really happy to be here.
It's lovely to have you guys here. I consider you both friends. I consider you people that I value in this industry, authenticity, legitimacy, and a bit of fun. So I have known you guys a little while from your time at Astrid. Always took care of me there. Back when I was nobody, you can always judge people by the way they treat nobody. So Bash, Joel, thanks for that, fellas.
Oh, mate, we treat everyone the same, and you are always a friend of ours.
100%. You've always been a somebody in my eyes.
Very sweet of you. Well, like I said, lovely to have you guys here. Before we get into the serious stuff, I do want to know, what's the most surprising or funny thing a patient has ever asked you about medicinal cannabis?
Oh, this always goes back to strain names for me. I remember times counseling patients. This goes back to my early days at the dispensary. There'd be, a patient on the phone. I'm like, doctor has prescribed, this flower for you, and the patient's waiting. I'm like, bear with me. It's called Death Baba.
Yes. And it's some super straight-laced, legitimate person just like, excuse me.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm like, it's a legit strain, I swear.
It's medicine.
Here's booty clapper for you.
Exactly.
I have a very, very similar experience. It always goes down to those genetics, and I was counselling a patient, and a classic strain name of Girl Scout cookies came up in conversation, and I had to kind of walk the patient through the difference between getting an actual cookie and getting some dried herb flour, and just kind of break the news to them like, no, it's unfortunately not an edible product. You still do need to inhale it. That's just the name of the genetics.
Yes.
And it was a very interesting and funny conversation.
That really reminds me of when I was a bud tender and I would try and tell people about the flavor and aroma profiles or something. Like, I don't want any additives. I'm like, this one's got beautiful notes of mango. I don't want mango added to my flour. So yeah, I mean, as we all know probably better than anyone, there's a lot of misinformation in this space, a lot of disinformation, a lot of learning. We'll try and cover some of that today and we'll see how we go, but it is great to have you guys here. You both come from clinical backgrounds. Joel, obviously as a nurse, Bash as a pharmacist. How did your training in medicine kind of help inform the way you approach patient care? First when you're at Astrid and kind of now what you're doing with Exotican?
Well, honestly, like with the training, like I was in pharmacy for about 4 years before I joined Astrid, and during that time, I worked for all the major chains and everything. And a lot of the time when I was practicing, I felt a lot of the relationships were transactional, right? I didn't have time to sit and chat with the patients. I was fortunate enough to manage over in Clayton, where I was able to kind of get away from the responsibility of just dispensing and talking more with the patient. But this was around COVID time, and as we know, during COVID, burnout is real, and that's where like my savior in Astrid came in. And then I was offered the opportunity to work at Astrid, and Astrid provided a beautiful platform for me to have time to sit and talk with these patients and, give them my expertise, give them my knowledge, and have the time to sit and listen to their stories, and, just be front on, patient facing, and just dive into something that's stigmatized by a lot of the community and just try to destigmatize it. It's been an awesome journey that way.
Yeah, and I can see that excitement that comes to you because it gives you life. You can get stuck in a job or in a career or in a profession. And I talk to a lot of people now who are kind of burning out no matter what they're doing. Like I think it's hard for anyone to find a great job at the moment. You've kind of got to forge your own path. So when I see that excitement and enthusiasm, that life you've got, that's what I get out of this space. What about you, man? Joel, coming as a nurse, what did you learn from your training that you can now apply to what you do?
Yeah, so I was very privileged to have the background that I had. I was able to work for a nurse for about 5 years for a few different organisations, but the one that stood out the most was the Royal Children's Hospital, which is a world-class organisation, and I was exposed to a lot of really good kind of processes as well as really good stories. I got to see kids be in their worst possible state and have them walk out the door 1 day, 2 weeks later, 5 weeks later, 5 months later. And every person that came through that hospital left with a life-changing experience. And even though they were leaving with potentially maybe some scars or some, broken bones, they all left better than when they came in. And that was the most rewarding process to be a part of. And I was working with the best possible team. But unfortunately, I had a similar experience to Bash in regards to working through the whole pandemic. Burnout was real, and I was looking for a 9-to-5 job in nursing. Cannabis was something that I'd always had a keen interest in, and I was exposed to it at the Royal Children's Hospital, actually witnessing a few kids that had suffered with lifelong seizures, getting some relief from these medications, and just hearing the patients not only talk about it, but the families talking about having to get the medication illegally and, go through the whole process in 2016, and now they have their child who was on a bunch of benzos now only have to have this one oil in the morning, and they're gone from having 20 seizures in a day to none. And I was like, I need to get involved in this. I need to find a way to use my clinical expertise to help people in this kind of aspect. And that's where I came across to Astrid. I was there a little bit less time than Bash. I was there for about 12 months. The best part about Astrid, as great as that experience was it allowed me to meet Bash. And we quickly noticed that we both had a very keen interest in medical cannabis, and we decided to kind of marry those ideas, and that's where Exotican was born.
And that's how we've ended up with the Bash Brothers of Cannabis. I love it. I do want to talk about Astrid for a moment. Listeners of this show will be familiar that I've always been, a big fan of what's going on there. And, Lisa's been amazing. Dr. Shu, way back when B was there, I've been very grateful to build these connections. All love and respect aside, how happy are you guys to be out of the cream uniform? Look, I say that because I'm a massive spiller of food on my clothes. No shade to Astrid. I just know how dirty I would make that uniform.
That jumper was getting washed daily by myself. Joel and I would actually plan our lunches so that lunches that were more likely to get our shirts dirty happen on a Thursday or a Friday to give me the weekend in case it needs a double wash.
Bash is 100% correct. We would literally avoid all the soups and the foes till the end of the week because it was a splash problem. And we'd come back with all these red dots on our jumper, and everyone would look at us and go, oh, okay, they've been here and there. But there's a reason why most of our Exotican clothes are black.
Yes.
So we've done it deliberately. We're not just trying to be cool. We're trying to make sure that we can't spill food on ourselves now.
We love our friends at Astrid. We love what Lisa and co are doing there. Absolute shout out to that 100%. Crew. Speaking of Astrid, you've moved on to Exotican, your own business. I'm going to assume that with the expertise you guys have, you've noticed some gaps in the market. You've seen some things that perhaps aren't being addressed for patient care. What has guided you to start this venture on your own and go out and start your own business?
Yeah, so I feel like when I came to Astrid, having known a little bit about this prior, it was a bit of a culture shock coming into the medical cannabis world of Australia. And just identifying that there is a lot of misinformation out there, as well as a lack of information available to patients. Obviously, there is advertising guidelines, but even in regards to the information that was being provided to doctors and then being provided to patients, as well as information that patients had readily available, wasn't always correct. And we were finding that we were the last line of defense in this space, and we had 10 to 20 patients coming to us a day and either not being aware of what they had been prescribed or why they had been prescribed it. And that is not a knock on the doctors. That comes down to the suppliers not educating the doctors correctly. And we saw this trickle down effect. And it was really an eye-opening experience because for me, coming from a hospital background, everything is systemized. There is policies and procedures in place. It's medicine. It's done to the highest degree. And knowing everything I knew about cannabis and how diverse and complex it is, I was like, we need to kind of change the framework a little bit. And I just wanted to identify those gaps and figure out ways that we could bridge those gaps. And that's where kind of we were motivated to start Exotican.
You've pretty much hit the nail on the head there. That's main motivation. Like I remember initially it was just me and Joel chilling back. I lived in the north. It was about 2 minutes away from Joel. So we'd drive to work together and we'd go home together. And we're chilling, in the garage. And then the idea came of, creating something together where we, all our passion, all our expertise can be readily available to everyone. And that idea just propelled and became Exotican.
I love it because not to diminish any achievements, but sometimes some garage or shed ideas don't quite come to fruition. Everyone thinks they've got this genius business model and this genius business plan. And it doesn't often make it out of the shed. So good on you guys for making it out of the shed.
Yeah, we definitely ran with the idea very rapidly. And when Bash came to me with that idea, I was like, no, you're crazy. There's no way we could do it. There's no possible way. But we spent every other day complaining about all these other companies and what they were doing wrong, and we were being told all these pain points by patients, and we're like, rather than complaining about it and just sitting here and being like, they could do better, why don't we give it a shot ourselves and try to actually influence change and make some differences to the patients' lives.
I think that's a really great approach, and I think any company in this space that's trying to do difference, it's important that the competition don't see that as an insult to them. It's like, no, we just noticed that this thing is missing. We want to come and do this really well. Us being proud of what we do or what we've got is not a knock on you, but I think there's a great opportunity in this space to encourage each other by the actions we make. And I'm kind of wondering, you guys are an importer of medicinal cannabis in a space where there's more and more conversation about the need for Australian cannabis. How do you guys choose the cannabis that you provide? How do you choose the medicine you provide? What goes into, what are the standards that you expect?
Yeah, I think the most important thing for your listeners to understand is that we are patients too, and we can emphasize with patients. And we did speak to a lot of patients in our years at Astrid, and we did kind of gather a lot of data on what patients are looking for. And there are some subjective things that we do look at, such as appearance, flavor, smell, as well as medicinal effects. But we also looked at much less subjective effects that Bash could probably touch on a little bit more than me. And we realistically just tried to compile all of this data together and build a system that we could then kind of apply and go, all right, this is the Exotican standard. Whether it is this, and this, is it a high quality end product? And we've just kind of tried to put all of this together and marry all these ideas.
Yeah, just to add that we did use a lot of subjective things like your bag appeals, your smell, things that Joel touched on. But also we looked at more objective things. I looked into a lot of research. One specific article, I'm not sure if you're aware of it, talks about the nose. Yeah. So they say that, if a patient has a pleasant, likes the smell of a certain flower, they're more likely to have a more pleasant experience with it. So using that kind of information, also using terpene profiles, using your COAs, looking at all the minor cannabinoids, and just seeing that that entourage effect and how it can possibly influence or help patients. These is all the things that kind of came together to help us with our choices, and to help us kind of create a system where we kind of rank.
It's interesting that you guys mentioned the need for doctors to better understand what they're prescribing and healthcare practitioners to give better information. what do you see as the obligations of the patient too? I think that's really important because I think sometimes there's high expectations from patients. There's a lot of kind of desire for, I want the best quality for the cheapest price or whatever it might be. But, they're not turning up with a pen and a pad to take down your advice. They're not turning up with an understanding of, say, the terpenes that work for them. Like, I know, for example, if limonene is the dominant terpene, I'm not going to enjoy that cannabis. However, if it's secondary or third, I'm not going to have a problem with it. So, you've got to do some self-evaluation, do some record keeping to help your doctors understand. So, maybe it's not the obligation of the patients, but what can they do to make sure they're better informed and turn up to their appointment to get the best out of it?
I believe what you touched on, like some form of record keeping. I believe a lot of companies do provide a symptom diary to pharmacies, and I feel like just the patient understanding, why they're using this medication, and we don't advise that you need to go and trial 20 different options and stuff like that. But like within your treatment plan, the first option that you try might not be perfect. So just having an open-minded approach. And also, it does come down to managing expectations on both ends with the healthcare professional and the patient. And this is kind of where we're trying to bridge the gap, is just have everyone understand that it is a journey and it's not about the destination. And it does take a little bit of time to sometimes find your perfect product or your perfect kind of treatment plan.
Yeah, just adding on to that, just come in with an open mind, be curious, ask questions, ask as many as you want. A lot of times when I'm talking to patients, they're like, oh, sorry, I'm asking so many questions. I'm like, no, please ask as many as you want. This is the reason why I'm here. This is, I can talk about cannabis all day. It actually sucks that we have like a limited time to talk about it, but ask as many questions as you can in this time that we have. Don't be shy. Whatever question, there is no question that's too much or no question that's too little. I'll answer it to the best of my abilities. And I'll always do that. I will try to go the extra mile for the patient, and that's pretty much what we try to kind of incorporate into Exotican as well.
And I'm sure, like, if you don't know, like, it's great to be asked questions you don't know the answer to, because then you've got to go do that research and actually figure it out, because cannabis is so, I wouldn't say subjective, it's just so embryonic. Like, we're still so early in the understanding of it. Like, we will look back in 400 years and be like, oh my God, I can't believe we were talking about indica and sativa. And that's okay. And I think that needs to, there's a little reminder for people just to be patient. We're all part of the journey. We're all contributing to the journey as well. Like, every experience someone has informs better healthcare or informs the industry. So I think it's important that we're having these conversations, we're answering these questions, and that patients see a little bit of personal responsibility to be stewards on this journey as well.
100%.
I can 100% agree with that.
Right on. Well, let's wrap it up there because we're all in agreement. Now, there's a bigger question here, given the fact that you guys are importers of medicinal cannabis. I've been a big advocate for Australian-grown cannabis on this podcast and just in public, but I also understand the need for imported cannabis. We've got these cultures overseas that are established. We've got these facilities overseas, this expertise. And there has recently been a rather interesting call in Australia by a select number of cannabis growers saying that perhaps imports should be banned in order to let Australian cannabis flourish. Now, I'm not here to put words in your mouth. I will preface it by saying I completely disagree, and I'm sure as importers of medicinal cannabis, you will too. But let's discuss this, and we'll do it in a respectful manner. But basically, some of the competition have said that you guys shouldn't get to exist. So how do you feel about this conversation about imports versus Australian grown?
Let's remove our obvious bias from this conversation. Like, we are bringing in product currently from Canada, but let's kind of take a step back and we go back to those systems that we put in place. We looked at available products from Australia, from Thailand, from South Africa, from Canada. And like you said, the global market and cannabis in general, we are still in its infancy. But here in Australia, we are especially in this infant state. And I believe that if we remove all of those biases and we were to just have this closed-minded approach and ban all imports, the only person who's going to suffer is going to be the patient. Because you have these Canadian markets that have been around for 20, 30 years. You've got the research there. You've got people that have all these SOPs in place. They've got genetics. They've got reasons to have high quality flower. And I believe it's a lot easier for a brand to go somewhere like Canada or even potentially Thailand nowadays and it's a lot easier to find high quality products. And I think banning those, you're going to then result in the market being flooded with more poor quality products. The other thing to consider, we actually love Australian grown flower. We want to work with Australian cultivators, and we've been very blessed since kind of starting this journey. Me and Bash did it in the dark. No one at Astrid knew what we were doing. We were doing it for 10 months, working on our own. And then UIC came up, and we launched softly, and we were kind of made aware of all these connections and relationships we actually had in the industry, and we got to meet a lot of really, really good Australian cultivators, and we've been able to go to Australian farms now and see that the future is bright. And there are teams and there are people who understand cannabis cultivation. One that comes to mind is there's a mob out of Victoria known as Kanai, Bryce Lawrence. That is someone who I personally believe really understands cannabis cultivation, and going to see what they're doing and what they're working on and already getting products into the market, we can see that the market is trending in the right direction. But to say that, like, you know, we need to have a closed-minded approach and just cut off all imports at this stage in its infancy, I think is only going to make us take 2 steps back.
I agree with that. Yeah, I agree with that. Honestly, at the end of the day, for growth to happen, you need competition, right? And it's not just internal competition. We need these people that have much more expertise, right? And then by having that kind of environment where, not to say that we're working against each other, right? But it's just seeing how the potential that can happen, right? And you see it and you're like, okay, then I can either be better than that or I can become that. Not to put them down, but it's kind of to motivate, right? And without these motivating factors, how are we going to become better? That's the way I kind of see it.
Yeah, it reminds me a little bit of in junior sport, there's this conversation about eliminating point scoring, and there are some leagues that do it. And it's kind of, it's interesting because I get the idea. They want everyone to have fun and have a good time. And as a former PE teacher, I value that, you know, give kids opportunity to feel success. But actually no one's feeling success in that environment by just going, all right, we're not counting the score. No one wins, no one loses. So it's kind of like, what's the point of doing this? And there needs to be some healthy competition. Full disclosure, the best cannabis in the world I've had is from Thailand.
Yeah.
Some of the worst cannabis I've had is from Thailand.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's like, and there's these broad brushstrokes being painted. And I hear phrases like inferior quality imports. There are some inferior quality.
I agree
imports,
with that too.
but not all of them. There's some inferior Australian quality and there's some fantastic Australian quality. I've been privileged to be in grow facilities here in this country. Tasmanian Botanics welcomed me with open arms. Biotica Green Farmers welcomed me with open arms. I'm not criticizing them at all. I love that it exists, and I'm excited about Wangara. I'm excited about Golden Days. There are people here who give a shit, and I'm stoked for that. But it seems very bold to me. It seems very short-sighted, and it seems very much like I'm taking my bat and ball and going home for people to call for a ban on imports. So I'm not here to put words in your mouths. That's definitely how I feel about it, because we need this culture, this expertise, this knowledge to come from all over the world. Let's not get so kind of patriotic that it's just going to be about Australia, because no one wins.
I couldn't agree more. I believe as Australians, we want to support Australian grown. We want Australian made products. I also believe that, like, Australians are some of the most nationalist people, like, that I actually know. We just don't advertise it as much. So, like, I feel like we're as bad as Americans when it comes to, like, being proud of our country. We just do it in a much more subtle way. And again, like, the market is calling for Australian grown products, but we don't want to just bring in something because of that notion. We don't want to impact on the quality. And if we were to compromise, I guess, our systems and just bring in something because it's locally grown and it's potentially slightly fresher, but it's got all these other issues, we would be working against all of our values at Exotican. So for now, like, you know, Canada is where we started, but we would love to kind of bring in high quality cannabis from all over the world and bring in the best cultivators and the best kind of genetics from that area of the world. It has nothing to do with Canada just having kind of lots of high quality cannabis, or even Thailand. It's about finding the best cannabis in Canada, the best cannabis in Australia, the best cannabis in Colombia or Portugal, or even those, like, you know, countries that aren't known for growing really, really high quality cannabis, and just kind of bringing that to the market and just kind of bringing that high quality aspect across the whole board.
Well said. Well said.
Yeah, absolutely nailed it. Absolutely nailed it. Well, before we pivot and talk a little bit more about some other things, I want to take a break here and spend some time having some fun, playing a little game with you guys. I did refer to you as the Bash Brothers of Cannabis here.
Love it.
Since, you know... so given that you are the Bash Brothers of Cannabis, this quiz is called Quack Attack, the Mighty Ducks quiz. Before we get started and we talk about rules and things like that, are you guys across the Mighty Ducks universe?
Maybe I was when I was a kid, so this will be interesting. I'm keen to just have some fun, have a laugh. Why not?
I've definitely seen all the movies, but it's been a very, very long time. So please get into the rules, but I'm not expecting a great performance on this quiz from either of us.
100%.
Well, it is a 7-question multiple choice quiz. There are 3 answers for each. So, you know, you've got a 33 point. Oh my God, I'm not going to do that again. You got a 1 in 3 chance of getting it right.
I love it.
What I do want to give you guys the choice of is, do you want to play against each other or do you want to team up and play together?
We discussed this after listening to a few of your podcasts, and we believe that for the sake of community and for the sake of Exotican, we want to work together.
Oh, that's sweet. Excellent. Well, that means...
Bash Brothers all the way.
Exactly.
That's it. Hey, playing to the theme. So that means that there's no need to yell out names or anything like that to get your answer in first. We can just play it together. So let's get started on Quack Attack, a Mighty Ducks quiz. Question 1. In the original 1992 Mighty Ducks film, who plays Coach Gordon Bombay? Is it Emilio Estevez, Charlie Sheen, or Rob Lowe?
It's definitely
Let's speak boldly, guys.
It's
A.
Yeah.
That Emilio is correct. That is correct indeed.
33% chance.
Hell yeah.
That wasn't a guess.
I got to say, with the lack of confidence on that one, I don't know how you guys are going to go with the rest of it. Question 2. What was the name of the law firm Gordon Bombay worked for before getting sentenced to community service? Is it Ducksworth, Savoy and Gray, Bombay and Co., or Slater and Gordon?
I believe it might be A again.
That is correct.
That is correct. Ducksworth, Savoy, and Gray. Hence why the team is then called the Mighty Ducks after Mr. Ducksworth, Gordon Bombay's cranky boss.
We had a 50-50 on that one.
Slater and Gordon for sure.
No win, no fee. Yeah. Actually, I got to cut that out. They're not paying me for that. All right, this one is the most pertinent one for you. Question 3. Which 2 players are known as the Bash Brothers in the sequels? Is it Averman and Goldberg, Fulton and Portman, or Charlie and Adam?
B.
That is
for Bash.
correct.
Yes, very nice. Fulton and Portman are indeed the Bash Brothers, one of the more famous parts of the movie series. You guys are killing it. I had my doubts. 3 from 3.
So did we.
Still have it now.
Yeah, I'm still seeing the lack of confidence. Hey, there's still time to mess this all up. Question 4. Which NHL team did Disney actually create and name after the films? Is it the Orlando Quackers, the Minnesota Flyers, or the Anaheim Ducks?
That would be C, the Anaheim Ducks.
That is correct.
Ooh.
What a hell of a PR move. Hey, we've got this movie. Let's make a real NHL team.
They did it
great.
Straight after the first movie as well. They did it before they even made the the movie franchise.
Yeah.
It's so rapid.
So I'm looking forward to the Exotican NHL team. All right, you guys have crossed the 50% threshold. Even if it's all downhill from here, you've passed. But question 5. What is the purpose of the flying V formation in the Mighty Ducks film? Is it to confuse the opposing team, to intimidate the other team with synchronized speed and pass coordination, or to allow the goalie to join the attack?
Could be all of the above. I'm thinking either B or C.
All right, we're down to a 50%. So I'll give you those ones again. B, to intimidate the other team with synchronized speed and coordination, or C, to allow the goalie to join the attack?
I want to guess C, but I'm happy for you to take a stab.
I don't know.
The tensions are high here.
Tensions
the
are-
relationship may be struggling after this one.
It will never struggle. We are one. You think it's C? It is C.
Incorrect. So it is to intimidate the other team with synchronized speed and pass coordination.
Does the goalie get involved in the flying V once or twice though?
Look, there might be a technicality there that I'm not willing to explore.
No, it's fine. But I'm like, I remember that as a kid. I remember her coming out of the goals, and I'm like,
Yeah, look, I've got to admit, as I read that question, I'm like, shit, I'm worried that C might lean into that one a little bit. But
Trick
I'm
question.
I'm saying that I totally know that no, that's not the answer.
I'm about to get one wrong.
You did. Question 6, we've got 2 to go. What offence leads to Coach Bombay's arrest and eventual community service coaching gig? Is it driving under the influence, disorderly conduct at a game, or faking injury for insurance?
It is A, driving under the influence,
That is
and it was
correct.
alcohol, not cannabis.
There we go. Look
Coach, at you.
Coach, smoke some hooch, mate. I always found that, like, as a kid, I was like, that's a real dilemma. Like, that guy had a DUI. I don't know if I could trust him as a sports coach.
Yeah, he's like, he went down a dark path, like, to have
did.
that redemption story.
It's all about redemption. It came back.
All right, our lucky last question. What was the original Mighty Ducks movie titled in some international regions, including the UK and Australia? So it was not called The Mighty Ducks here in Australia when it was released. Was it Power Play, Champions, or Ice Warriors?
I feel like B is just too easy.
Yeah. But I feel like it's Ice Warriors, to be honest.
Yeah, let's go with C.
Denied.
B was not too easy. It was the
it's
correct
Champions.
answer. The first movie in Australia and the UK is called Champions. So even my DVD version of it is called Champions. And then
wow.
there's D2 and
Should
D3.
have trusted your gut, mate.
Sometimes the easy answer is the right answer.
So the Bash Brothers of Cannabis got 5 out of 7 on the Quack Attack quiz. I think that's pretty damn good, guys. Well done.
That's a win for us, honestly.
That's a massive win for us. I was not expecting. I was expecting like a 1.
All right, back to our cannabis conversation. I'm curious as to what is something that you wish every GP or specialist knew about prescribing or referring patients for medicinal cannabis treatment. This could either be existing prescribers or, like yesterday when I went to my real GP, he has no idea about anything about cannabis. I almost make people uncomfortable in the medical profession, like doctors, if they don't have anything to do with it. When I tell them I use it, they're like, oh, okay. So take your pick, whether it's a doctor that's cannabis naive or someone who's in the weeds right now. What do you wish that they knew about prescribing?
Honestly, I think this applies to both. It's just about cannabis as like a whole umbrella, right? When it comes to medicinal cannabis, it's not a destination, right? It's a journey. And just knowing that, the first thing that may be prescribed may not be the right thing. There may need to be augmentation of therapy quite a lot until we kind of hit that mark. And just knowing that and knowing that it's not a one-size-fits-all approach, I think would be a great mindset that everyone should have, every prescriber, whether prescribing or not prescribing.
Only thing I have to add to that is kind of aimed at the cannabis naive doctors, and it's like, you can say something cliche like just have an open mind and yada yada yada, but like as healthcare professionals, we work as a multidisciplinary team, and that basically means that even if you're a GP who is not prescribing anyone cannabis, you're going to have your patient come to you with these prescriptions, and just kind of understanding why they might be prescribed these medications and not having a closed-minded approach and being able to collaborate with maybe more specialized prescribers and just kind of have a holistic approach to your patient's care, I think is the general direction that the industry needs to kind of head towards, because these GPs may have a closed-minded approach, and the sooner that they open their mind up to collaborating with the doctors that are willing to prescribe it, the easier the patient is going to be able to talk to them, and the better patient outcomes we're going to get.
100%.
It's a really interesting space because it merges a culture that's existed in some place for thousands of years. When we're going back to the deep roots in China and the Middle East, 50, 60 years when we're talking about British Columbia and California and stuff like that, there's all sorts of existing culture into something we're trying to ram into a medicinal model. There are clear gaps, there are clear changes of mind people need to have about something like cannabis, but there's also this very traditional model of medicine that we also need to respect. How do you deal with those competing priorities? Culture and medicine coming together. We're in a highly clinical space, but it's also something that's highly personal. How do you bridge that gap as healthcare professionals?
Well, that's actually a very good question. It just goes back to who me and Joel are to begin with, right? Joel already mentioned we are patients, right? So we're patients and healthcare professionals. So we're pretty much, as individuals, we're bringing that together. Like it's when I say that cannabis saved my life, and the reason I say this is because we go back to when I was managing, I was burnt out. I was ready to quit pharmacy as a whole, and then to be able to bring something that I'm so passionate about, that I have so much knowledge about, and then bring that somehow into pharmacy, and like shout out to like Lisa, Astrid, for giving me that opportunity. I think it saved my life, and I think that just being able to be that person that's bridged those two things, and then show everyone else, whether it's other prescribers, whether it's patients, that it is possible, that you can bring the clinical aspect into the cultural aspect, and they can work together. It's just eye-opening for me, and I hope that this, like my journey, can be eye-opening to others, and they can experience and kind of be inspired also by what inspired me.
I'm just really, really like I'm almost gonna get emotional based on Bash saying that. Like just hearing you say that and like sharing that is it's amazing, honestly. And again, like we share so many similarities when it comes to our life journey. I think with me personally, I wanted to be a nurse from the age of 17. I spent a lot of time growing up in kind of the hospital system, and it was my way of paying those nurses back. And cannabis came into my life probably 7 or 8 years ago. I've actually been, a kind of fan of cannabis longer than I've been a nurse. So being able to marry these two loves and kind of use all this knowledge that I gained through self-study, through like general interest, through just a passion of diving down a massive rabbit hole that is this plant, and are these compounds, and are these different genetics, and like I could go on for days about it. And just being able to use this knowledge that I thought was useless. I thought like I had all this knowledge. I would go to a party or a social gathering, and I'd have no one to talk to, and I'd feel like an outcast. And just being able to not only use it in a professional setting, but to use it to help people really drove me and gave me a new kind of like drive in terms of healthcare. And it comes back to what we're trying to do with Exotican. We have 4 pillars around like kind of like transparency and like curiosity and just like asking these questions, providing education. And I feel like that's where bridging the gap will really come into play. There's a medical model for a reason, and this culture exists for a reason, because these are the people that have drove this plant forward for so many years. So we can't forget that culture. And I feel like going in with just a strict medical model and trying to leave that culture behind, it's not going to work out. So it's about marrying these two kind of ideologies together and really just kind of making sure that everyone is looked after.
I like that, because I think one of the things we have come to know about cannabis is that it can suit many, many people from all sorts of walks of life. It can be a great connector for people that are different, but I do think that there's an underlying similarity with a lot of cannabis consumers, and I think you guys have shown that in the sensitivity. There is a sensitivity to a lot of cannabis users where they're trying to get a greater understanding of themselves, trying to manage things better, whether it's burnout at work, whether it's trying to make a career make more sense for them. I think it's really powerful that it can do that. And I know when I was a bud tender, sometimes being responsible for the people that use cannabis can be quite a burden, in a respectful sense. In these people are sometimes at the end of their tether, at their wit's end, they're delicate, they're fragile, they're struggling with something. How do you kind of ensure that some of those patients that are struggling, those patients who are like, I need my medication today, and I think a lot of people get frustrated at those people for not being more organized, but I think you start to understand just how helpful this cannabis can be for people. So how do you work with some of those people that are kind of on the edge?
I think Bash can agree with me here, but I think being a nurse, doctor, pharmacist, any allied health member, anyone involved in the healthcare of someone, you develop a strong patience muscle very, very quickly and very early in your career. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to provide care to people. And like you said, like it's very easy on one side of the fence to be like, oh, these people should be more organized, or they should do this, or they should do that. But at the end of the day, they're struggling with something for a reason. they're coming to us for assistance and for help. And it's just about, first and foremost, always empathizing with that person, putting yourself in their shoes. And we were blessed at our time at Astrid to talk to hundreds, if not thousands of people that had trialed a bunch of other things. And this would always be about managing expectations and just kind of letting them know that, yes, you might be prescribed something like CBD, and CBD might do X, Y, and Z for this other person. But just understand that for you, your endocannabinoid system, it might not work for you as well. And most of the time, they were coming to us at that kind of last resort where they were like, you know, aware of it enough to like manage their own expectations and go, I've tried everything else. Like this is all I've got. Like, I don't care. Like, this is fine. And then within 2-3 weeks, that same person comes back to us and they go, I'm sleeping for the first time in 15 years. My pain has never felt this
Why
good.
didn't I try this earlier?
And just like, and I feel like that's the main motivator in terms of like nursing for my whole career, is just seeing the patient outcomes. Like being able to be like, just get on this bus ride with me. And when we get to the end of this bus ride, I promise you that, like, you know, you're going to be more happy than you were when you got on the start of the bus.
Do you guys think you're going to miss the patient care side of things now that you've moved into the business side?
100%, but we're trying to integrate it as much as possible, and we're trying to be as accessible as possible to patients wherever we can as well. So we want to keep that like as a part of our core values.
Excellent. You have mentioned those core values of Exotican. Tell me a little bit more about that. So kind of, yeah, what's the vision? What's the like we've touched on these in like delicately throughout the conversation, but if you were to pitch Exotican to me right now, how would you describe it?
So Exotican is our parent company, and it is being designed to better the whole industry. What we want to achieve over the next 5 to 10 years is a world where cannabis is accepted by all in Australia, whether that's as a treatment, as an option, as a plant. We just want to reduce stigma, be transparent, and promote kind of education, and just bring everyone up with us. Like you said earlier in the podcast, I think it's about these other brands in the space understanding that we're not coming in here trying to disrupt it, trying to like, you know, cause issues for them. We want everyone to grow with us. We want everyone to kind of improve the quality, because again, that's what's going to lead to the best outcomes for the patient. And that comes down to a lot of other things that we're hopefully going to work on.
Yeah. You've said it 100% correctly. It's just to add to that, it's at the end of the day, like I've always said this, it's a big pie. You know, why are we all like trying to hog a part of it? It's not like that. At the end of the day, my favorite thing is to eat with my friends. So let's all eat. It's a big pie. Yeah. Let's all come together. Let's sit at the table. Let's just, you know, let's all feast together. Let's all do this together. Let's all grow together.
Yeah, let's all have our own volcano bag and enjoy it.
Yeah, exactly.
Or let's all have a piece of the volcano bag. I did terribly with that analogy, but I love what you guys are saying.
We might steal that one, actually. We'll refine it a little bit.
Yeah. That needs a bit of chat GPT on that one. I didn't quite nail that analogy. Talking about product innovation, are there particular formats, cannabinoids, or delivery systems you guys are excited about? And, you know, whether it's Exotican, whether it's just the dearth of products you guys have seen, I think it's 1,200 odd SKUs in the market right now that you guys have seen as nurses and as prescribers, as nurses and as pharmacists. What gets you excited? What are you seeing in the market that like people should be doing, aren't doing enough of? Tell me more.
Well, honestly, I'll start with the newest thing that's kind of tickled my fancy. I'm looking at all these like all-in-one vapes. Yeah. And just because honestly, like being like as a pharmacist on the front line, the patient's already been prescribed this medication, right? And then on top of it, I'm like, oh no, you got to fork out some more cash because you need a battery. And then they lose the battery.
Yeah. and it's really hard to buy because of the nicotine vape bans.
Exactly. And then, you know, just this innovation of an all-in-one where all of this kind of gets put behind. And then, you know, I see it as putting the patient first. You know, we're making this easy for you. We prescribe it, pharmacist goes through it with you, and then it comes into your hands and it works.
And ready to go.
You don't have to. Yeah, you don't have to. Play with voltages. You don't have to use a different vape for a different type of cart because of its size. Because and look into 510 threading. Like the first time I said that to a patient, they looked at me like I was speaking Chinese.
There's so much language in this space that is just assumed that someone's going to understand. Yeah. Like 510 vape cart is the industry standard. Well, most patients don't know that. You know?
They've never seen a vape cart before.
Yeah, exactly. And that they've got to do some kind of weird ordering of a soldering iron. Have you guys seen this? Like on Amazon.
With like the herb iron.
So it's called a soldering iron, but it's just a 510 battery that they've screwed like a needle onto. So that's the way of... I am not endorsing it. I am simply just sharing that you can go online and look for a soldering iron 510. I'm not endorsing it, just saying you can do it if you choose.
Oh, I love that. That's the best thing I've heard today.
So obviously, the all-in-one vapes is something to be super excited about. What about you, Joel? What are you seeing out there that gets you excited?
Similar to Bash, like I am excited about those, and I feel like they are kind of the future for those. I feel we, even in Canada and America, we'll see those 510s slowly get phased out. One other thing that has really piqued my interest for a long time, and something that I've done a lot of self-study on as well, is cannabis extracts. And I'm super excited to finally see these come to the medical model here, because I believe there is a lot of medicinal benefits to being able to access medication that you can precisely dose and have a lot more or a lot less kind of excipitants and also in vapor in your lungs. So the beauty of these concentrates, and again, not endorsing any use or anything, but just having the patient have the option to use a lot less of their active component and get the same results. And I believe in the long run, they could, for certain patients, become a lot more cost effective as well and a lot more accessible. But it's about the market, and the prescribers being educated on these products and understanding that there is a medicinal use for them and they're not just a recreational product. And I think that will take time. So I feel like we're just kind of buying our time in that aspect.
Yeah. I'm pleased to hear that emphasized, because I think it's very Australian to look at the people that are doing the wrong thing and then paint the broad brushstroke that everyone's doing that. There are absolutely people taking the piss in this market, whether it's the companies or the patients. Let's be completely honest. There are people who do not yet understand just how medicinally powerful this is or how therapeutic it is, that do just want to do a sick dab.
Yeah.
But the other 90% of people shouldn't be missing out because there's some loud people on Reddit. And I think this is something that's really important to me, is the AMA, I believe in Queensland, have called for, the scrapping of the SASB program, and particularly the scrapping of concentrates at the very least. And I just find that it's incredibly ill-informed, because a few people can take advantage. We don't ban cars because a few people die in them, every week. We don't ban booze, which, we could have a whole different conversation when it is
very long conversation.
Ruining and destroying
Mighty
lives.
Ducks,
Bring it back. The Bash Brothers. The Bash Brothers.
Coach Bombay, you let us down, man. You should have been blazing. But I think that's really important. I think there can be this great emphasis that because some people will manipulate the system, that we all are. And frankly, we are not. But there are other delivery systems that are beneficial to people. I know there are so many people out there who don't want flower, but they do want an all-in-one vape. They're not going to bother with a cartridge and a battery they've got to recharge, but they will get an all-in-one vape. There's edible delivery formats. Then there's exciting things in an adult use market, like bath bombs and topicals and patches and things like that. Suppositories. There's a hell of a lot of exciting things out there. So I think anyone who kind of hears people misusing cannabis or, kind of taking advantage of a product delivery format, I think we've got to remember there's a hell of a lot more people benefiting from those than there are taking advantage. So it's great to hear you guys talking about those. As we head towards the end of the show, I want to make sure that we've covered all our bases, and you guys have explored a lot of really great things today, and I'm so grateful for your time and sharing your stories, sharing your sensitivity, sharing your expectations, your vision. Education is something that's super important. It's important to me as a former teacher. It's important to me in my current role in the industry. We keep saying patients need more education, doctors need more education. So at Exotican, what is your vision for that?
Honestly, that's a very good question. And just to kind of go back on that, thanks for having us and having these awesome conversations. It's been a pleasure being here. But just in regards to education, our whole kind of ethos and everything is to provide the education. But rather than sitting there talking about our things, we kind of want to go about it as a brand agnostic education, where we want to better everyone, right? We want to teach you about everything. It doesn't matter. When we talk to prescribers, for example, we're like, if you have any questions, it doesn't matter about what brand. It doesn't matter if, it's about just say a CBD oil and we don't have a CBD oil. Ask Like, we have this expertise, utilize us. And if you want more information about it, well, I'm happy to create a presentation for you. I'm happy to come and sit and talk to you about it. I'm happy to send you a text. Here's my number. Like, we're accessible. We're, we're on the ground. Just, if you need us, we're here. We're always happy to help. That's our whole thing.
Right on. What's the best way for people to get in touch with you guys?
I would say probably for our website, there is contact forms for doctors and pharmacists, as well as patients. They can actually book in a conversation with a registered nurse to discuss. And that's for cannabis naive patients or experienced patients that just have questions about kind of their processes and stuff like that.
Well, fellas, as we get towards the end of this show, the final segment is called Pauls of Wisdom. And though we value the long-form conversation, we like to leave the listener with a little dinner party fact, a takeaway, or a call to action. So, Joel, I'll kick it off with you. What is your Paul of Wisdom?
So it just comes down to one thing that I want people to understand with cannabis is it is a diverse system. Cannabis is something that, it's taken me 8 years to just scratch the surface. And I believe that as an industry, we're still scratching the surface and we're so young in its infancy. And I'm so excited for all of the research that is coming and all of the evidence-based stuff, but I'm also excited for the development of the industry. And I'm really looking forward to kind of new products coming to market, like concentrates, like all-in-ones. I'm looking forward to all of the kind of doctors growing in knowledge and getting to the point where, you've got just your GPs prescribing and not just cannabis clinics. And I feel like, we just need to be patient as patients. The industry is getting better. Everyone is getting smarter and we are growing. And I know it's frustrating at this stage, but if we look towards Canada or we look towards America, like the future is bright. And, even those places have only been around for 50, 60 years. There's been a lot of kind of red tape and a lot of, reasons why cannabis can't be researched or it can't be accessed. And these walls are finally coming down. So the future is bright and I am so excited for it.
I've used this analogy before, but the first cell phones were around in the 80s. The iPhone was 2007. This is going to take some time
100%.
And people do need to be patient at every level. And what really resonates with me there is just that it's kind of like the more you know, the more you realize you don't know.
Yes.
Bash, what about you? What's your Paul of Wisdom?
Well, honestly, it's not 100% mine. But this goes back to when I first got into the industry, right? So my father's a psychiatrist, right? He's got an old school mentality about, medicine, Western medicine. And then when I told him, that the TGA has changed their guidelines regarding medicinal cannabis and I am getting into this space, I was expecting very big pushback. But he came at me in a very wise way. He goes, at the end of the day, I'm not smarter than the TGA. He goes, we either adapt or we end up getting left behind. And so I took that and I'm like, okay, I love this because I can apply this to all of the cannabis industry. Let's all work together and adapt together and evolve together and become better all together. And so, shout out to my dad for that wisdom.
It means a lot when your family, when this space resonates with them, when they see, first of all, what you get out of it, but then what the overall potential is. And I know many people struggle with the fact that they don't get that endorsement from their family, yet they persevere regardless of that. So I'm really glad that you do get that. Gentlemen, again, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you here. I consider you both dear friends. Happy to have you in the lounge doing this podcast in person, which is a very rare thing. But I think this is something I'm going to do more often now that you guys have shown me that it can be done well. So Bash, Joel, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much, Paul. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, Aves, my friend.